Guys, everybody. This is going to be part 3 coming up for the, free response. We're going to look at like thesis statements and APUSH. But right now I want to offer my 2 cents right here about people a little bit, maybe more so the teachers in general are freaking out about learning and what kind of assignments are going to get completed. Will you finally understand, vector quantities or something that's a little bit like differential equations, in your work? Just give me, again, 2 cents here. That's all my rant is worth. Really think that you guys and gals will be learning a lot. Actually, during this time that we have this respite from in-person in class. It's a little atypical take, but I think that doing, assignments, whatever they are, but more so that you're doing it, you're in control. You read a book, you even look at movies, you learn something, you expand your vocabulary, you start seeing what maybe, you start talking with your family, you're talking with friends, you're talking with other people, and you begin to, critically think about things. You're not so much that you're, have a formal debate, but I think in this time that you will be learning and you will be learning more on your own. And I do think that's when learning takes place, when you're more in control and that you want to learn yourself instead of being force-fed by us. Don't get me wrong. We do have a function. We're usually kind of trying to inspire you to learn the material and to learn on your own. People are kind of freaking out about, well, everything that's going to, they won't learn like, again, these trigonometric functions if I don't teach them in class, I'm going to be very excited that you guys will do some more, expanding your vocabulary in your own. You will look at some of the things that maybe I trying to guide you into and that you'll learn because it will not be a set time. It will not be on some kind of standard schedule, but you're kind of more relaxed, you're more open to learn. So I'm pretty excited that you guys will be okay. And if we do start in the fall on time, your brain will reconnect and get into the schedule. But I'm excited, really excited. And again, hopefully more than anything that's more important, that your mind is a little bit understand that if you have some more priorities dealing with your health or the economic situation of your family, that should be your priority. And all this other getting instruction and assignments should be, secondary at this point, if that's the case. All right. So anyway, just my little, again, I hold it up again, my little 2 cent rant here. So let's get started on the thesis statements and the APUSH and the free response. Okay. Hey guys, what's going on? So we'll continue on today. I'm going to give you some quick reminders, really quick. AP Classroom, we have some reading responses there. So there's a couple of small assignments some prompts kind of reflective of maybe what possibly will be on the online test with the short answer questions. Yesterday we went over political cartoons and examining them, how to approach those. Look at the Moodle as well. On here, I put a couple of other things on the APUSH Moodle about short answer questions and answers on here. And I'm going to put what work we do today. I kind of see this as maybe you'll even go back to these videos once we find out about April 3rd. What's the kind of format of the test? We do know 2 things for sure. 45 minutes, no multiple choice. 45 minutes, no multiple choice, as I reemphasize that. So this is part 3 of kind of what was the expectations before, and what we can use probably in preparing for the online test in here. So, and this is about thesis statements and about arguments. You see on here, it used to be that you had 2 essays to do. You had the document-based question essay, and then you had 40 minutes suggested time for the long essay question. You're not going to have a complete essay, I don't believe, because they're giving you 45 minutes. I could be wrong. It could be like they just want you to respond to these prompts and write an essay. I'm kind of hedging my bets. I think it's going to be a combo. But you still might have to maybe make a paragraph response, or they want some kind of, argument. And it's not going to hurt you to as we kind of reemphasize, how do you make a claim and a thesis statement in APUSH, and what makes a good thesis statement, what makes a good claim in APUSH. Even online testing, they know that this is going to be a rough draft. If it's a time event, you're not going to be able to do some research, some thoughts. You need to come in kind of cold. So your writing is going to be a little rough. It's not going to be refined. Hemingway, they attribute this quote to Hemingway, who knows that, there's no good writing, only good rewriting. And, that's just apropos to any type of essay, even in APUSH. Main things to remember always in APUSH, they're not always looking that you spell the Rush Bagot like, exactly correct, but definitely come close. They're not looking for exact, complete, perfect grammar, but it makes it easier to grade when things can flow. And that's the main thing. If your sentences, your organization, even your short answer questions flow, a reminder of yesterday, if, the ACE thing that you kind of answer the question, cite examples, and then you explain or expand upon those. That's what you should always follow. Do your answers flow? When you're doing your practice assignments with me that's due next week, is it flowing? Is it kind of understandable? Are you answering the question or addressing the prompt? That's the major thing. That's why I always say, you're going to see me today. Well, let me look at this prompt again and see if I'm answering the question and addressing it. APUSH thesis statements are all about really to make claim or an argument. And it's really taking a stand. Take a stand on something. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't be in the middle of the road. Let me just take a real quick thing here. Yes. It's over here a little bit, kind of more out of the way. That what any APUSH essay response will follow this format. You might not have to do an essay because they're only giving you 45 minutes, but I'm just going through it. Is a thesis statement. It must be defensible. I know in English, I know you're making a claim. It's got to have some context. You're going to have you got to understand if it's the French and Indian War. Well, what's happening preceding before that? What's happening afterwards, going on during this time, and a little bit afterwards too as well. What is the kind of situation? Why are we led up into? Why are they having a meeting in Albany, New York in 1754? Please give us the setting. Don't just jump into it in here. Give us the Star Wars scroll in here. And always evidence specific factual information, as much as you can recall that applies to your thesis statements. And you must use comparison, contrast, compare this to something else. What's similar about it? What's different about it? What are the causes of the Revolutionary War? What does it change over time in regards to civil rights? What is what's kind of stayed the same with women's rights in the 19th century, the early 20th century. So you must be doing those things on here. And don't worry, this is going to be, I know you're really riveted by this. You see this right here, what I always say, that if you're doing an essay, starts out very general, gets very specific, All the arrows pointing towards your thesis statement. That's the way it should be in your short answer to as well. Sentences should connect. One of the biggest problems with writing that we see in our young folks is that you're disjointed. You're not making any connections. You're not closing the loop. You're not referring back to your intro sentence into your paragraph. Always go back to your central argument. I know in English they always say your claim. So always do that. And in the conclusion, you kind of re-emphasize your thesis in other words. You don't really offer new materials, but you do kind of, unless it's something that connects to your thesis statement and you're trying to show how it connects to the present day or as in comparison to other events and happenings in history. Very good. Don't worry, you'll see this. It's kind of a good graphic, kind of like big picture in here. Main thing today is arguments, thesis statements in APUSH, unlike in other courses. And I know what some of you are probably already thinking. I know how what a thesis statement is. I know what to do. It's taught in English. It's not exactly the same. Very similar. What the expectations in AP US history is. You might have learned some other nuances in there that's different from what AP US history is expecting you to say. Still the basic premise, claim, argument. Take a stand on something. Don't just make express a fact. We're going to see some examples in here. So let's see. And what you would do as we get back here, you would see that you in a traditional essay test, like if we had a traditional format, you'll be given 3 prompts and you would pick one of them. We're going to do 2 and 3. You see 4 here says evaluate the extent which the creation of the internet in the 1980s both changed communication methods in the U.S. and show continuity with previous technologies. Not going to be on there because anything post-1945 would not be on there. All right, but we're going to use these examples from Marco Learning and give them credit because it's pretty good examples. And we'll get started. We'll just write thesis statements. We will come back and flesh out an essay if we find out after next Friday that's what you're going to be doing. And we'll work more upon that on here. So let me read this prompt here. And matter of fact, let's just go to the PowerPoint because I have it on here. Evaluate the extent to which the transatlantic slave trade fostered economic change and long-term differentiation in the American colonies in the period from 1607 to 1808. Always, making sure look at the day. Went through that pretty fast, even right now, trying to teach a lesson, even though I've seen it before today. I like to read it again so I can kind of understand how to address the prompt. Instead of going so fast, you're worried about completing a response or completing your test, telling you the graders are more worried about the content if your answer is gold or if it's pretty worthless if you're not writing 4 or 5 sentences, 2 or 3 sentences, and it does not address the prompt. You're really swimming across the English Channel, making it all the way to shore just to die. All that effort put in there, and you just not address the prompt or answer the question. Answer the question. I've said it so many times, and I'll keep on saying it until you're sick of it. All right. Evaluate. And evaluate is always what you're going to decide really the, good points or negative points on there with this. When you're evaluating, you're going to evaluate and you're going to take a stand on here. Anytime you see evaluate. A lot of times you see in prompts in APUSH about evaluate. Evaluate the extent which the transatlantic slave trade. I'm always scared every time I see the slave trade because I'm worried about if, students think they know about slavery, as I said before in part 1 video. Fostered economic change. So it's not political change. It's not social change. It's about economics, business, commerce, trade. So that's why my brain is thinking. I'm not thinking about, the cultural aspects of this slave trade. I'm not thinking about really the political aspects, the 3/5, compromise, or maybe I'm kind of dating myself here, or how did, African Americans got more freedom after the Revolutionary War, especially in the northern states, and long-term differentiation in the American colonies. So you see, what was the impact of slavery in kind of making the colonies different and have different kind of concerns and different kinds of needs, or different kinds of kind of approaches to the Constitution and whatever to in their self-interest to look out for. And from 1607 to 1808. And 1607 is one of those deal breaker kind of dates, because that is the founding of Jamestown, Virginia, there in 1608. Yeah, 1607. I'm sorry, my bad. 1808 is what, if you can remember, that marks the end of the legally the slave trade to the U.S. They put that in the provision into the Constitution in there as a compromise there to end the slave trade. So we're going to start with bad thesis, some examples of bad thesis, and then also this is a pretty good thesis, but it's not optimal. And you're going to see here that in your time period, if you're going to, in your time constraints, that you're probably not going to have always the time to come up with the most polished, best thesis. When you're doing papers, you do have, that's like you do in 2 or 3 weeks. You should have a work on your thesis and should refine it to where it's very effective. All right. So let's look at bad thesis number 1 here. The transatlantic slave trade fostered changes in economics during this time period by the negative effects it had on African Americans transported along the Middle Passage. The transatlantic slave fostered changes. Now, first of all, one of the mistakes that you'll make in APUSH, unlike maybe English or you've been taught before, you should not restate the prompt in APUSH. You should not restate it and put it in your own words and use most or majority of the phraseology in the prompt. You do not do that. Do not. I've always, the theme in APUSH is not using the document, copying like sentences, or using most of, the prompt or the stimulus and just pasting it on. You should not do that. I'm just going to read this bad thesis. The transatlantic slave fostered changes during this time period by the negative effects it had on African Americans transported along the Middle Passage. The negative effects, it does not address anything. It's too nebulous. It's too general. A good thesis, I'm going to say something that's contradictory, is generally specific. You want to be general enough that you can support it, but you also want to be specific enough that the grader knows where you're headed to. You don't want to be too specific because it does not leave you to elaborate and use your specific factual information to support your thesis. So it's I know that sounds kind of strange. Bad thesis 2. The slave trade affected the colonies during the early 17th century by bringing in more diverse populations to the Americas. Well, not too bad here. The importation of Africans brought in unique cultures that blended and assimilated in the colonies that would make the American colonies more different amongst the regions because it had of this increased diversity. Well, you say, but Mr. Price, it's pretty good because it's longer. I know that's what some of you say. It addresses the diverse part in here in the prompt. That's great. Notice there's an and. And the biggest and that you don't see in here is more talking about more the social kind of demographics of that prompt, but not the economics. You have to address both parts. All right, let's see. Let's go to not so bad thesis 3. And the reason why I say this isn't too bad. If you came up with this during your 45-minute time, even, if they just want you to address take a particular argument on this, and you had to address do an intro paragraph. I don't know what the format's going to be, but this isn't so bad. This isn't so bad for coming on. All right. Transatlantic slave trade would change the population and economics of the American colonies forever by self-sustaining and increasing African population number in the millions. Somewhat generally specific. The eventual replacement and widespread use after Bacon's rebellion in 1676. And again, it doesn't happen overnight, but I love that the eventual kind of replacement, transitioning from wide use of indentured servants to use of African slave labor, and the dependence upon the Southern American colonies on slavery. Yeah, so it's not like so bad of a thesis. It's okay. I'm pretty sure most graders will say, well, there's some things that you can sharpen up here. Let's read the rest of your essay and see if it really supports this thesis statement here and come to your conclusion. Is it organized? Does it flow? Does it go back to the thesis? It's a combo. So really, if you don't have the sharpest thesis in an essay, you can really help your thesis statement with the rest of your essay. This is more what you would optimally. All right. This is more pristine, not perfect. There's no perfect writing. There's just no perfect writing. All the great authors, whether you're Norman Mailer or you're F. Scott Fitzgerald, you're going to do proofing. You're going to do some rewriting, some rewording, some rephrasing. You may even scrap some chapters or some things of that nature. It always happens. There's no perfect writing. Let's look at something that's a little bit more solid. I always approach things into contradictions. I always recommend this using the counter-argument thesis methods. You don't have to do this because you're much smarter than I am, but it's something that's always worked for me. It's worked for even some other teachers I advise to have to take their test that's going to grad school as well. So it's a pretty solid formula in a way. So using all those or using something that you see the other point. Although most slaves imported between 1607 to 1808 went to Latin America and the Western Hemisphere mostly, transatlantic slave trade would change the demographics and economics of the American colonies forever. And I always say this, if you can always think of three things, it's always in threes. It gives you 3 paragraphs to set up besides your conclusion, your introduction, and what you're supporting. I'm surprised I didn't come up with 3, arguments here, 3, examples as proof in supporting my thesis statement. Don't worry, okay? But I'm always shoot for that if you can. All right, so by 1, the eventual replacement and widespread use of slave labor, particularly in the plantation colonies. We know that's kind of another using other words in the southern colonies. The growing dependence among the Southern American colonies on slavery to sustain their cash crop economies. In the early, again, the 17th century, we know probably the biggest cash crop is tobacco, and in South Carolina, indigo and rice for sure is these kind of cash crops. Cotton is not king at this point, as I've emphasized. And a self-sustaining increase in the African population, number in the millions, that would affect Southern colonies' continued support of the use of slave labor. So you'll see that the Southern colonies are going to be the evolution of this, as we all know, you guys already know this, are going to be having more different political and economic interests than the middle colonies or the New England colonies. Because of its dependence upon slave labor. It's just growing, this is the basic of their economy. Post 1808, as we know, it gets up into the Civil War. But you see why they're going to be arguing for, in the 3/5 compromise here, why they should be counted as far as, the population and the representation, because they want to be represented in the federal government on an equal basis. So slaves should be counted as their population, because, as you know, in South Carolina, they're going to outnumber the, European English settlers and other settlers that are in South Carolina. So you would want that. So different interests. Very good. So you read it, you take a look at it in the time here. So what would be a more solid thesis statement in APUSH U.S. history? I didn't say, and you notice something else that I'm going to keep emphasizing, please, which just drives me nuts when students write on a certain kind of college level or getting into upper grade level in high school, and as you transition to college, is that in social studies and history, we don't need this you in your feelings. We don't need I think, you think, all those kind of, like you're doing some kind of journal. Stay out of personal pronouns. Get them out. Do not do that in history. Unless your instructor, particularly if you're class A, it's okay, but you should never, it's bad practice. You're writing, some people cannot just stay away from I, you, all these persons, and it's just really fulfiller. And God forbid if you, and I don't know, I told you you're not going to be doing full essays and all that. I mean, God forbid if you do your last paragraph with starting with in conclusion. That is just you should not be allowed to write anymore. If you do that, that's the hackiest of the hack things in your last paragraph. Oh, Mr. Price, that's how I was taught. Well, you know what? It's wrong. It's wrong. In conclusion, it's the last paragraph, or, you're coming towards the end of your essay. It's obvious. You're coming to some conclusion where I'm looking for a conclusion without you trying to point it out. The hackiest of the hack things ever. And stay out of personal pronouns. Just stay away from them in social studies. English, some kind of poetry, some kind of things that you're doing, go for it. All right. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to really, emphasize what's the expectations, and you don't want to put a bad taste in your grader's mouth. Your essay might be wonderful. If it does not flow, you're using a lot of bad grammar, misspelling a lot of simple words. It really puts a bad taste into your somebody that's looking at your writing responses. So you do not want to do that. I didn't say you have to be perfect. It's more about content. Let's look at this second prompt here. And it's labeled 3 because that's the way it's labeled on the kind of prompts and the mark on learning. Evaluate to extent which the War of 1812 marked a turning point in the American foreign policy. Analyzing what changed and what stayed the same from the period before the war to the period after it. Let's see here. Let me reread it again. You say, Mr. Price, you read? Yes. I know I've seen it once. I've seen it twice. I gotta get my head together, even if I'm giving examples here. Evaluate to extent which the War of 1812 marked a turning point in the American foreign policy. Right? Analyzing what changed and what stayed the same from the period before the war to the period after. Change over time. That should just jump out to you like an alien up on your face here like that. So what changed before the war and what changed afterwards? You might even talk about changing the war. I would say to yourself too, if you get a prompt, whether you want to type it or not, I would take some notes or some things in my head or something. I would not just assume in here. I know they're going to have some highlighting tools and things to underline, like the things that I have, as far as looking at tools to highlight or on there. But there's nothing wrong with already take some notes before you address something. even if you have pen and paper. They're not going to stop you from taking notes from it at home. Okay, let's look at some bad theses. Let's look at probably what's the optimal one on here. Good. Bad thesis 1. All right. Well, that should be the war. That would not be. I don't want it to be that bad. The War of 1812 marked a turning point in American foreign policy by giving the United States confidence in being an independent nation. Pretty self-explanatory why this does not suffice. Doesn't say anything. Really a general statement about this. True, but you're not, again, addressing the prompt in any type. You're not making any headway at all. Okay? So, why don't we go to bad thesis 2? The War of 1812 was caused by 3 influencing factors. The most important cause affecting the United States at this time was the impressment of sailors in the Atlantic. War hawks were also concerned about the British Army Native Americans in the Northwest Territory and a general interference with free trade over the Atlantic. Oh, man, these are all factual information. There's 3 points. Pretty good. One thing, it didn't address the prompt. It's about foreign policy. It didn't say about the causes of the War of 1812. Good work. Good, factual information. Waste of time. Because you did not really address the foreign policy part, the change over time with America with prompt. This is why it's a terrible thesis. And for some students, they would just look at you and say, it's a fact. You're not addressing the prompt. I cannot emphasize that enough. Oh, man, it's really hard to look at in a way. And it's very, even if it's an example for me as a teacher, an APUSH teacher. Not so bad thesis. Not so bad. This is not so bad. In here, before the War of 1812, the young United States, I'll even just give this example here, just capitalize, was trying to follow a policy of neutrality and non-interference with European affairs. Pretty good. But after the war ended, the United States began to assert itself more in the world. Very good. Probably a little bit too general. You probably I think they're already alluding, you may mention about some presidents, maybe some, again, events to be a little bit more specific to kind of sharpen this up. It's not so bad, though. I'm telling you, a grader probably would not be like, pretty pedestrian, pretty ordinary, does not really get to the target, and I don't know exactly what you're trying to say, but let me read the rest of it. All right, let's look at something that's a little bit more optimal. And notice it's already starting with George Washington. You're being specific. You're already telling your grader that this is about U.S. history. You're already knowing things here. I like it already almost in a way, and I haven't seen the rest of it. Again, history teachers love knowledge, and they love that what did you learn in U.S. history? I cannot emphasize that enough. George Washington's farewell address emphasized a need to avoid military alliances. And Jefferson, who followed Washington after John Adams' presidency, emphasized those type of alliances would entangle America into conflicts. You often hear about these entangling alliances, and Washington Moore did not use that phrase, and it gets kind of confused. He's more talking about military. He did not mind economic alliances, economic agreements, to have trade. He had his proclamation of neutrality. He's just worried about honoring the French military alliance that we made in 1778. He says there's no need for that now. Hamilton said it was null and void because, the king got the, execution. But he was more talking about avoiding permanent military alliances that would get us into conflict. Plus, we're young and dumb in a lot of ways at the time. We're very weak. I don't know if we're maybe I'll take that back and everything. I'm not saying we have some pretty talent there about like saying we're dumb, but we're definitely weak at the time. Now let's continue on. And notice this is two sentences. A good thesis, a good argument in an APUSH is complex. So that's showing you the counter again, or showing you like what is going on here. It's giving you like some context in here about, about our foreign policy. The War of 1812 marked a change over time. You're like, Mr. Price, you used the phrase change over time. It's okay. You can use change over time. That phraseology is okay to repeat. Matter of fact, it probably will help the greater that you recognize that this is change over time. Marked a change over time in America's involvement in foreign affairs by analyzing actions of Presidents Jefferson and Madison to avoid direct conflict. I'm already alluding to the Embargo Act. And then Jefferson, before he left office, okay, all right, we'll trade with everybody except, England and France, good night, everybody, like that, and he left with the Non-Intercourse Act. And then Madison would make his bill number 2. So trying to stay neutral in this part, that's still there. But Madison will actually declare war, the declaration of war against Britain in 1812. Then you can go into some of that reasons why, with the war hogs, with the impressment in here. But you see our foreign policy change. We're getting into action. We're getting into this dismay by declaring war with Great Britain when Great Britain really was not really wanting to declare war. And they actually sent us, how time, the messages travel slowly. We don't have the internet or anything like that. No, not even a transatlantic cable to say, hey, look, we don't want war. We're going to we have new policies here about the seas. We're going to honor your agreements in here about, seizing ships and impressing soldiers. And it's too late, again, we're already getting ready to attack Canada, because Clay and them are already thinking that, hey, this is going to be easy pickings, and you see how that worked out for us. Lastly, in a more assertive involvement in affairs after the war under President James Monroe. So great that James Monroe, you see this. You're going to use examples like the Rush-Bagot Treaty, the Convention of 1818, the Adams-Onis Treaty 1819. Maybe you forget all those, but you know what you're going to end it in 1823 with the Monroe Doctrine, making a bold declaration that, well, yeah, we want to stay neutral, but we could be pulled into some type of active involvement if you mess with us over here in the Western Hemisphere, right? It's really a bold statement that we've come to a point that the great thing about the Monroe Doctrine, the British told Quincy Adams, yeah, we're going to make this kind of simultaneous agreement that we're going to protect our interests in the Western Hemisphere. And Quincy Adams is like, you know what? I don't think it's going to be we. It's going to be like us, the United States. It's just really, really a bold declaration, because Great Britain is still saying after, the war basically ended the same way from the beginning to the end, and Great Britain's most powerful country in the world, big growing and building this empire, even though we lost the English colonies, that we are going to make a foreign policy statement on our own and almost throw down the gauntlet, draw the line. That's awfully kind of big of us, the temerity, that we would have on here. It really is, really a change over time here. It just, God, I love coming into here in a way and just, reflecting upon history. This is why I am a history teacher. This is why I love history, because, again, it's always changing. And God, good historians will understand it. Interpretations, always the events and how we look at things, perspectives are changing when you look at history. You cannot learn it all. There's obviously some times here that I'm pretty sure there's people like some students, or maybe if one or two people stumble onto me talking, you can make corrections on me and some of the things I've just said or something like that, or you could add on or something like that in here. Just really amazing. So solid thesis. We end up here. I don't know if I'm running over one of the students who complains about the time. Again, they wanted a John Green 5-minute. I talk fast enough as it is already. I can't do that. On Monday, because we'll have the kind of long weekend, and I'll let you have some time to work on other assignments through your other classes, particularly your college classes as well. Get those things done. On Monday, we'll start with content, and go back to period 1 and get through period 7. And then after that, we learn next Friday, we'll learn more about the format. We'll continue on with that as well. So AP Classroom, get those assignments in. Next Wednesday, I'll just do it again to have some other things that will work in AP Classroom. Just talk to me contact me if you're having problems with that. I love you guys. Love you all. Blessings and concerns and prayers. Anybody working in your family, in the healthcare industry, anybody that's dealing with a layoff or job situation, anybody dealing with a real health crisis, whether it be COVID-19 or something that, somebody's kind of, all of a sudden somebody's going through something right now. Want the best for you. I believe in you guys and girls that you will be learning and you will be doing things. I implore you to do any type of reading on your own instead of reading the headlines, any type of kind of, perspective thoughts and kind of thing, thinking about things, whether you're texting somebody or you're online about that. I really do encourage you. You will learn a lot. I think and again, I'm just so happy that I do think that you guys will be learning a lot. May not be always our particular objectives, but just so happy. I know I gab on. I talk too much. I apologize for these long videos and long-winded videos that I am, but I'm old. That's what we do. We just talk too much. Okay? All right. I'll see you guys.